When people mention the best teams in the Western Conference, obviously they mention the Thunder, then the Nuggets, the Rockets, and normally the two LA teams in addition to the Timberwolves. But one team you don't hear very often mentioned is the Golden State Warriors. And considering they made it further than half of those teams I just mentioned in last year's playoffs, after having the third best record in the NBA with Jimmy Butler on their team, and only losing as a result of their best player and the greatest point guard ever getting injured, I think the Warriors deserve a little bit more respect. And if you were worried about the Warriors because of the Jonathan Kuminga situation and the fact they had 7 players on their roster just 3 days ago, firstly, that would be valid, but secondly, and more importantly, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Because there was already evidence to suggest that Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green were an elite trio. But now, the Warriors have added depth. Seth Curry, De'Anthony Melton, and Al Horford, in addition to re-signing GP2, and of course Jonathan Kuminga. And I believe one thing, when you surround Steph Curry with defense and depth, you always have a chance at being elite. And this right here is what the Dubs have done, because I feel like all we have heard this offseason is about the Warriors' lack of depth. Well, look at the Warriors' depth, because I think that's far from the truth right now. As you can see with Horford in the starting lineup, all of a sudden having Post and TJD as your second and third bigs looks pretty good. You could have Buddy, Kuminga, Curry, Seth Curry, Melton, GP2, and one of Moody or Pods coming off the bench, because I would expect one of those two guys to be the 5th starter. All of a sudden, you not only have depth, you have guys who fit different roles, you have guys who have different skill sets, different strengths, and whilst I'm not saying the Warriors are quite the OKC Thunder right now, this is a team that is much better than people have been giving them credit for most of the offseason. And, well, that makes sense because they just made their signings recently. But this is the new look Warriors, and they look pretty good. And there's a few reasons to think the Warriors should be better than last year. The obvious one being Jimmy Butler is on the team from week 1. I've said this 1,000 times, but it matters. The Warriors were 23-8 with Jimmy Butler in the lineup. They beat the 2nd seed Houston Rockets, and who knows what would have happened to the Timberwolves series if Steph didn't get injured. Basically, they were elite with Jimmy in the lineup. They're gonna have Jimmy from game 1 of this season, and they have started to figure out the rest of the lineup. Because another thing that no one is really mentioning is the Warriors do have young players. I know they have 4 really old guys. No offense to them, and everyone focuses on them, which makes sense because all 4 will be starters, but Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Quentin Post, and then a combination of Gee, Trace, and Pat Spencer will play minutes. And you can question how good you think those guys are, but the reality is they played heavy minutes last year, and what normally happens with young players is they get better. So if they're going to play heavy minutes again this season for a Warriors team with even better depth and better quality, then I would expect them to get better. And 2 guys who I really expect to get better, Brandon Podziemski and Moses Moody. Brandon Podziemski gets a lot of criticism. I mean, you could call him the most hated player in the NBA with what some people were saying about him. But after he returned from injury on January the 22nd, he averaged 15 points, over 5.5 boards, and over 3.5 assists, shooting 41% from 3 on 6 attempts per game, to go along with a good percentage from the line as well. There is a reason he plays so many minutes, and there is a reason his plus minus is always near the top for the Warriors. It's not a coincidence. And then there's Moses Moody, who as a starter averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game, which doesn't sound crazy, but when you consider he shot nearly 40% from 3, Moses Moody played his role to a T. Shoot the 3 ball and defend. And that's one thing he did fantastically, particularly as a starter. Defend, the point of attack defense, with his wingspan getting in the passing lanes, getting around screens, getting into the face of guys like Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson. It didn't matter who it was, Moses Moody was unafraid of going after each and every one of them, and the Warriors were a much better team with him in the starting lineup as a result. results. And just the development of those two guys, in addition to what we could see from Jonathan Kuminga, which as of now I have no idea, but I still think he will be a positive contributor to this team and everyone else that is under 25 years old. I think that's why the Warriors are going to be better next year. But the biggest reason the Warriors are going to be better this year is because of Al Horford. I know, he's ancient, in NBA terms at least, but he was the dream signing for the Warriors. This is someone that just perfectly fits everything you want from a Golden State Warriors center. Just ask yourself, has there ever been a more Warriors big man than Al Horford? Firstly, he's old, which the Warriors obviously love, but secondly, defense, shooting, passing, incredible IQ, and this man is a winner. I said this before, but he really is kind of like a bigger version of Draymond Green. Someone who can take on any matchup, who can mesh with any starting lineup, and who never seems to drop off defensively despite their age. And there is just a level of pride these guys have on the defensive end that you don't see from many other players in the league. One possession he's switching onto Darius Garland on the perimeter and blocking his shot at the rim. The next possession he's hanging back and waiting for Giannis to attack the lane and timing that block to perfection. No disrespect to Quentin Post, but he was massive for the Warriors last year because he was big and he could shoot. And whilst I think Quentin will be important this year as well, there is no world in which Al Horford is not better than Post on both ends of the floor and does both of those things I just mentioned, but at a much better level. And now all of a sudden, instead of relying on Post and TJD or Draymond at the 5, there is a knock-on effect and you have those guys as backups, and you still have the possibility of going Draymond as a small ball 5 for certain matchups. And what I mentioned before is also really important. These aren't just good signings, these are guys who fit the Warriors. They fit the system. They know the system. There won't be any growing pains with Al Horford, who is one of the smartest and oldest players in the league. DeAnthony Melton was a Warrior last year, so he obviously knows the system. And oh, that other guy, I think he knows the system as well.
Honestly, I've probably watched 95% of Warriors games for the last 16 years. So I kind of know their style, I know how they play.
And when you factor in all of these things, the Warriors should be an improved team from last year. And that's without mentioning the fact Steph Curry has had a full offseason as opposed to playing with Team USA. Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green had full off seasons. They are healthy. And as I alluded to it before, when those three played together, the Dubs just weren't good, they were elite. And the reason why, I mean, it's pretty simple. Not only are they three of the greatest players ever, all three are elite playmakers and great passers. All three have incredible IQs. They see things happening before everyone else does, and when you have three players who can see that, all of a sudden, it starts to click. You then have the offensive genius and gravity of Steph, which makes any offense good, regardless of who's next to him, and you could almost say the same for Draymond and Jimmy on defense. This is a team that is going to pride itself on two things: defense and Steph Curry. And if I know one thing, defense and Steph Curry is a good combination. Now, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Al Horford and what he could bring to this team, click here. DeAnthony Melton, Seth Curry, click here. If you want to see more content like this going forward, consider subscribing. It's free. Dropping a like would be cool. Most importantly, have a great day.